So it was quite a tremendous occasion. It was really seen as something important to celebrate.
It was a fantastic idea. It was greeted with enormous scepticism when it was first mentioned, but it ended up being an absolutely riotous success. It brought in millions of pounds extra revenue, thousands of more visitors, royal visits. Everybody who's anybody came here, and thousands of Manx people came from all around the world. And we had an exhibition that was opened last night in the Millennium Room, and Sir David Wilson was there, who at the time was the director of the British Museum, and he said to me, actually, what Millennium Year did was start the worldwide revival of interest in the Vikings. So the Jorvik Centre in York and all the programmes and stuff we've seen actually started because of our millennium and, of course, Odin's Raven, that epic voyage of those men sailing from Norway all the way round to the Isle of Man.
And that's the ship that's in the House of Manannan.
In the House of Manannan. It's a proper replica of one of the great Viking vessels. They sailed it across the North Sea with no support vessels. They really did the job properly. They had a riotous time coming down through the Hebrides with capsizing and all sorts of stories. And they arrived spot on time at 6 o'clock on the 4th of July to be greeted then by the governor and the bishop.
And that was an extraordinary feat, wasn't it? Because these were just normal guys. They weren't, you know.
They were normal guys. They trained and they pulled it off. It was incredible.
And something else that started, I understand, in the Millennium was the Arboretum.
The Arboretum was there. The Millennium Way was created, of course, pulling together all the footpaths on the Highlands. We had the Millennium Carpet, the Millennium Tapestry, and the 3 Legs of Man outside the airport. An interesting story. Brian Neal did that, and the committee were very pleased he was commissioned and so on. They weren't so pleased when they got the bill, and when they saw it, they were horrified. Everybody hated it. No government department would have anything to do with it. And in the end, the chairman, Jack Nivison, of the Airports Board said, well, you can put it outside the airport if no one else wants it. And poor old Brian was so upset he didn't come back to the Isle of Man for about 10 years. Now, of course, it was so far ahead of its time. Everybody loves it. And if you said, we're going to melt it down, there'd be an absolute outcry. But we weren't used to his sort of eviscerated and those little buttocks hanging on the back. No one had really thought where you put buttocks if you've got 3 legs, but there they are.
And you can now, in fact, buy sort of miniatures of that, can't you?
Yes.
There's a fascinating interview with him, and it's really quite touching on a documentary that Dave Armstrong made a few years ago, the 1979, A Very Manx Millennium, and he talks quite openly about it and says how heartbroken he was by the reaction.
Yes.
But there it is, as you say. So what a year, so many achievements, so many things that we see now.
And the Queen, of course, came. That was the big highlight. We had 700 military personnel over in Tynwald week with all the horses and the landaus and the household cavalry, who, of course, wear jack boots, and these big boots come up to their thighs. They can't bend their legs when they sit down. When they go around in London, they're in a coach, but they're standing in the aisle holding onto the seats. And Robert Quayle had to find limousines on the Isle of Man to take them all around. One of the military police, he was checking into his hotel in Douglas there, and he found that the person checking in front of him was a member of the IRA on holiday. So the story goes. No arrests were made, but there were all sorts of things happening. I brought over Mary O'Hara and the chieftains because I was organising Celtic Week. And Paddy Maloney insisted that the chieftains were paid in cash. Well, the Treasury didn't do cash, so I had to get a special dispensation from the Treasury and go down to the Isle of Man Bank, and they gave me £2,200 in a bag. Normally in those days, the cash was going the other way over the counter from people. So I walked down Victoria Street and into the Villiers and paid Paddy his cash.
That's amazing.
That's how it was done in those days.
Wonderful.